Here is the third and final part that encompasses the footballers whose height is from 189 centimeters to exactly 2 meters. It may surprise, but being really tall in football is rather a disadvantage. In a game where the play goes mainly on the ground and the main assets are technique, agility and pace, the man of big size usually looks ponderous and cumbersome. Less so goalkeepers and central defenders, but even among them only the best athletes, generously rewarded by nature, like Virgil van Dijk or Rafael Varane, could really excel. It's significant that in the whole history of the game, only one 190 cm plus tall player managed to win the Ballon d'Or. You will know who he is by watching this video. The great Portuguese is a proper man in order to say welcome to the Valley of Giants. It's really ironic that the most celebrated athlete of our time has no definitive height allocated to him. In the early stages of his glittering career, Cristiano has been usually portrayed as a 185 cm tall footballer. Then, approximately in the middle of his Real Madrid chapter, this number discreetly changed to 187. But recently, the Portuguese Football Federation classified him as a 189 cm tall player, and as long as this source is the most official of all and this information is the freshest, I decided to follow this line. Delving into the issue, I want to point out that the height may slightly fluctuate, up to a centimeter or two, depending on the time of the day. In the morning, it's obviously bigger. Checking these photos, I came to a conclusion that Ronaldo's true height probably varies between 187 and 189 centimeters. He is visibly higher than Sergio Ramos, a legitimate 184 centimeter tall player, and seems like a man of almost the same size as Mario Mandzukic, whose 190 centimeters height is verified. Initially, being one of the most physically gifted players of all time, the Portuguese stands alone among them in terms of dedication, zeal, and immense ambitiousness. On the contrary to Gullit, Ronaldo, and Ronaldinho, who gladly accepted what nature gave them at birth and then simply exploited it, Cristiano increased substantially his innate strength through hard work. That's why, for example, he had so many reliable ways to score and altered his game not once or twice, depending on the team needs and style. 30-35 years ago, when footballers were in general much shorter than nowadays, the legendary Dutch trio has caught the imagination of viewers not only by their stellar skills, but also due to their impressive size. It would be fair to say that Rijkaard was way ahead of his time and defined the prototype of defensive midfielder for the next several decades, showing a brand new level of sheer physical strength, stamina and aerial ability, the qualities that are essential for this position. Being a pretty plastic and technical player too, Frank, who at the Euro 190-88 was Ronald Koeman's partner in the center of defense, deep down inside remained an offensive-minded footballer, and very much like Sergio Ramos, scored a plenty of goals in the decisive games. Like the Spaniard, this unusual kind of activity for a predominantly destructive player had a side effect, and Rijkaard's habit to gamble a lot on the field drew the ire of many famous coaches, from Johan Cruyff to Arrigo Sacchi. All of them often wondered how a player of the Dutchman's caliber, talent and experience could be at times so unreliable. It's very symbolic that Frank's long-time teammate and good friend is next to him here. They know each other very well back from the days of their childhood and made a debut in the Dutch national team in the very same day in the same match. To this point, Gullit remains the only Ballon d'Or winner whose height is above 190 centimeters. Ruud, who in his youth looked like a genuine giant on the pitch, was one of the most versatile players of all time, both in terms of roles and skills. For a man of his size and back in his AC Milan days, the Dutchman has been classified even as a 192 centimeters player. He had an uncanny technique and dribbling ability, even if the first touch sometimes has been his Achilles heel. Along with good fundamentals and a pretty solid football IQ, it made Gullit almost perfect player, and he could have accomplished even more, be he a different type of character, more dedicated and ambitious. We are talking here about the highest standards indeed, but his range of interests outside football was always wide and became even wider when Ruud achieved a celebrity status back in the late 1980s. The famous Italian goalkeeper shows us how crucial is the standard of quality in perception of footballers' greatness. If you think of it, Buffon in his borderless, almost centuries-long career won not that much. He immortalized himself through the World Cup triumph in 2006, but all his other ventures in this tournament proved to be absolutely fruitless. His Champions League struggles are well documented, although 3 finals in the space of almost 15 years in this ever-changing and demanding competition should be considered as a big achievement itself. The Italian won Serie A 10 times in total, but did it at a time when the prestige and flair of the league already visibly curtailed. This is a debatable assertion, but just 3 or even 2 championship titles in the golden 1990s would have given him more glory and accolades. To a certain extent, the eternal Gianluigi became the person who puzzled together 2 completely different eras in the Italian football. Indeed, the fact that Buffon's skills were equally relevant both in the late 1990s and in, let's say, 2017 reflects the decline of Serie A. But first and foremost, this is the testimony of his verified and sustained greatness. Being a pretty tall goalkeeper, especially in his distant youth, when the footballers of this role were at least 5-6 centimeters shorter on average, the Italian has been able to combine the size and ability to intimidate opponents with elegance and fluidity. On top of that, he always been a great communicator, and even if his career lasted just 10-12 seasons, it would be hard to find a prominent goalkeeper in Europe who praised, taught and admonished defenders more often than he. It's always hard and sometimes even unwise to compare the players from different generations, especially goalkeepers, because this role changed the most over the course of time. Nevertheless, it's hard to shake off the feeling that Neuer is the most skillful footballer who represented this particular role in the last 50 years at least. Obviously, he is not the first goalkeeper who frequently effectively assumed the functions of outfield player. René Guita, Jorge Campos and Fabien Barthez, strictly on a club level. Being on international duty, the Frenchman always performed in a more serious and reserved manner, did it in the past. As for José Luis Chilavert, and Rogerio Ceni. They even used to score goals, but all of them acted purely individually, without being tied to team style of play and tactics. On the contrary, the conception of Germany, and especially Bayern's football, was and most definitely is largely based on Manuel's exclusive qualities and his ability to distribute the ball and act in certain situations as an additional defender. Performing in this style, Neuer won almost all the prestigious trophies, and this shows his stature. Extraordinary mental toughness and ability to instantly bounce back after rough mistakes, it's obviously impossible to avoid them at all, bearing in mind the Germans' risky manner of play, perhaps are Manuel's most underrated and unsung assets. Failing in an important moment, many even good goalkeepers could lose their confidence at least for weeks, but Neuer, after that, tend to perform even better than he usually does. In this light, the prediction that following his dismal display in the first leg versus Villarreal, he would be one of the protagonists in the return game looks like a very safe bet. The 194 club produced not so many world-class footballers, and if the exuberant Erling Haaland represents the future of the game, Gerard Pique embodies the glorious past, even if at the age of 35 he still has something to offer. Being a pretty tall player, the eloquent Spaniard is a deceptively elegant defender with a superb passing skills and pleasant technique, the player who is firmly associates with a particular football style and constant winning at very high level indeed. The ever boastful, arrogant and acrimonious Swede is the tallest outstanding outfield player in the history of the game. Ibrahimovic, who used to refer to himself in third person and magnify even his smallest achievements, is rather outstanding in terms of pure skills, not deeds though. Being admirably subtle, technical and coordinated footballer for such a huge and mighty guy, Zlatan has never been a protagonist in big international matches, playing for over a decade for the most prestigious European clubs with enormous budgets and influence. He only once managed to pass the Champions League quarter-final stage. The irony is that even then he hardly excelled. In the games against Inter in 2010, Ibrahimovic, who, this is a stunning fact, couldn't find the net in his first 16 playoff Champions League matches, was incredibly quiet. It's debatable whether the Czech international is the best goalkeeper in the Premier League history or not. After all, the competition is pretty strong and the choice is really wide, but there is little doubt that among his peers, the former Chelsea star has been the most effective. During his illustrious career in England, Petr kept clean sheet 202 times, and it's a record by a mile. It's true that Cech has been assisted by the robust and well-drilled back line, but even in this case, the goalkeeper's output is evident. The Czech was pretty reliable dealing with crosses. The small number of unforced or rough mistakes has been his other undeniable strength. On top of that, he was an extremely brave man, suffering not only potentially career-ending, but also a life-threatening injury in the infamous away game versus Reading in the autumn of 2006. Later, he has been able to return to his best level of play, which is remarkable. The famous Dutchman was kind of a trendsetter. In the middle of 1990s, he became arguably the first prominent goalkeeper who possessed good passing skills, using not only his hands but legs as well. In the Ajax's sophisticated system of play, Van der Sar was somewhat of a false sweeper, given that the team of Louis van Gaal still deployed the last defender, who in many cases distributes the ball from the back. Meanwhile, Edwin's career started pretty slowly. In the early 1990s, he for several seasons was a seldom used backup of Stanley Mensa and has never been considered as a promising goalkeeper. But in the spring of 1993, after Mensa's disastrous performance in the away game versus Auxerre in the first leg of UEFA Cup quarter-final, the frustrated Van Gaal reversed the roles, and Van der Sar took that opportunity with both hands. At first, he was probably even too excited. At the very beginning of the home match against Auxerre, his erratic pace nearly turned into goal and infuriated the Ajax defenders to such an extent that they were about to beat him up. But the Dutchman miraculously kept the clean sheet in that game and eventually transformed himself into a pretty respectable figure, we all know. Bundesliga historically has been the promised land for tall footballers, and the former Werder and Arsenal defender is a good, if not the best example of it. Despite his impressive size, the ponderous pair, who in his youth was paired in the center of defense with the equally towering Brazilian Naldo, had a good touch and frequently displayed some fine passing skills that later caught an eye of Arsène Wenger, who always thoroughly selected players for his trademark highly intelligent combinational style. Mertesacker has been also an important and integral part of the German national team that won the World Cup in 2014. After that, he finished his long and prolific international career on a high, having 104 caps under his broad belt. The giant German should be also praised for his uncommon frankness, retiring from football quite early for the modern standards. Per candidly admitted that he for many years suffered from anxiety attacks and ruthless mental stress on the pitch. Let's not fool ourselves. The completely forgotten German goalkeeper here is rather by default than courtesy to his skills and career achievements. It doesn't mean that Goltz was a hopelessly bad player though, otherwise he wouldn't have managed to be the almost undisputed number one for a decade, representing Hamburg. On top of that, the lanky Rijkaard deserved the place between the sticks pretty early for that era, at the age of 20. In 1990, he helped Hamburg reach the UEFA Cup quarter-final stage, and after that enjoyed a couple of pretty decent campaigns in the Bundesliga. On the other hand, he has never been called to the national team, and it definitely happened for a reason. In terms of reaction and agility, Goltz, who frequently conceded awkward-looking goals, was far behind the likes of Andreas Köpke, Oliver Kahn, Stefan Klose, Jens Lehmann, and even Hans-Jörg Butt, who peremptorily supplanted him in 1997. After that, Rijkaard was forced to move on and played for Freiburg for several more seasons, expanding his tally to pretty respectable 453 games in the German top flight. Checking the height of the Belgian goalkeeper, I was really surprised. Initially, I thought that Courtois is 5, perhaps even 6-7 centimeters shorter than he actually is. Being exactly 2 meters tall, Thibaut is at least on a par with the best in his role in terms of reflexes, leaping ability, and coordination of movements. Along with very good fundamentals, it made him one of the elite shot blockers for years, and at the age of 29, he turns 30 next month. The Real Madrid number one has a right to feel that his best seasons and major trophies are yet to come.